probably again. So yeah. Oh no, wait, I'm winning. I'm winning from you. Okay, I
I
can
mean,
do
you're
it.
the host, so the game doesn't start until...
Welcome everyone to game number 3 of our Newcomers tournament. Playing today is, in this round at least, is Medi, Bilbo, B. Baggins, Faranas, and Voss. And joining me today is the one and only Blues.
Hello, so this game we have a power colony and a double power price. Always fun when that happens.
And a lot of green prizes. The only thing, still starts half, so if you found smart, can like upgrade immediately. Oh, that's a really good found. So
Very strong scientific found with good access to a lot of resources. Always have to be a little concerned as scientists about how you're going to get into power quickly in these situations, but
you have to go into either wind turbines or solar panels. Really, only one. You probably want to buy into carbon or silicon before you upgrade, and you use your free gun on the power. Because if you get attacked on your power, you're in a lot of trouble.
I mean, geotherms are maybe an option this game with steel starting cheap, but still...
You don't want to do that, science.
Yeah, generally no. Also, not really so sure you want to be going into the triple steel right away when steel starts half and iron starts double. That's just a lot of investment.
That's why Voss went into 3 iron tiles and upgraded immediately. That's really big.
Yeah.
But he found it last, I think. Yeah,
I'm not really a fan of the placement in the crater. It's very cramped for an expansive who's going to need a lot of claim space, but it is good resource access. Might have preferred just founding like next to the water.
Well, he has common next to it, so it's kind of fine for me. Yeah, it's better to found on top of the water, like below that high one, so you get that free water money early on.
Right.
He decides not to do that. Bilbo, the elite, is still an HQ level 1. He can upgrade now, he has 4 claims. Let's see what he's going to do. He probably wants to go into some water and go into reactors, but he needs to worry about that.
The thing about Bilbo having 4 claims now is that also means that he didn't spend one of his HQ1 claims. And he really could have used a claim on iron.
He's choosing to not do that for some reason. Maybe he doesn't know, maybe he thinks Voss has enough iron.
Right, I think he just can't decide what to do right now. Which is okay, but generally do not upgrade until you know what you're going to do with your claims, because otherwise you're just consuming extra life support, building up extra debt, and not getting any benefit out of the upgrade.
Okay, let's look at Medi. Medi is going into one single glass and one single silicon. Is only producing 0.5 silicon. That's not what you want to have. And he still has 2 claims.
Right. I mean, part of that, I think, was just electronics starting double makes it very hard for him to get to HQ2, especially after you spend that 2k on the mutiny on the iron mine for some reason. And since Bilbo Baggins was driving silicon so low, the glass made sense at the time. But yeah, definitely need to be careful about these nomad founds when electronics starts at 200.
Into a second class now, and now there's an auction for next claim. I think this should go for 24k, around that number, even 28k should be good, depending who gets it. For runners.
Vash getting it I'm not too comfortable with. He was making power money off this nice early geotherm. No one else is in power, no one else really has a plan to go into power. No one else really can get in power easily. So this was just going to continue being a very nice source of income for him. 24k is just a lot of cash to pay. Fairness, on the other hand...
But I think it's worth it, because power is not going down, so even if he gets another geo, which he's getting, he can still make power money, because no one is going into power, and I think that's going to end the game really early.
That is fair. That is one of the big reasons I pointed out early why I was concerned about Varanus's found, and he still hasn't done anything to deal with power. he founded with a lot of debt. You definitely need a plan to not fall into ridiculous amounts of debt in this sort of situation. Going to a geotherm now.
Yeah. That's too late. I think he shouldn't have gone into those reactors, but just go into 2 solar panels. I mean, you delay like your next HQ, but it's better than going into C depth or no, probably D depth. Yeah, D depth.
I think the bigger mistake was just going to the glass in HQ2. That could have easily just been some water into some reactors or food. It wouldn't have been less profitable by much, or at all even, potentially. And it would have been so much easier to get online. And
I would say yes, but I don't think that was the problem. He's in D+1 depth. It's mainly that he didn't use his HQ level 3 claims right.
I mean, he put down the 2 reactors first, and then eventually he went for the
But I still think he's fine, because he is first on HQ to make lots of money, because life support is really high. Other 2 players on HQ level 2 only forces probably the danger here.
Right.
He's making power money, and I would even go into more power if I was forced and just like buy someone early out.
Right. Instead going to the patent lab. I'm not sure what his plan is for that, but that is going to take a ton of money to run with chemicals already up near $180.
I don't mind it if you go for superconductor and goes into solar panels.
Yeah, solar panels are definitely a good option here, with Matty Rasker and Bilby Baggins selling down a lot of silicon. It is very cheap to get into those panels.
Let us go first. This person is ready.
Oh no. Okay.
I mean, he's still going to make power money.
I mean, yes, but at this point it's going to be 48k in cash, more or less, that he's put into these extra claim auctions. He could have bought out Baroness by now.
It's bad, but it's not like the end of the...
Right, it's not terrible, but it's suboptimal.
It's suboptimal. Baroness is also going into a lab. I think he wants to get superconductor or carbon scrubbing. But he is going for nothing else.
I mean, neither of those patents would do a ton for him right away.
Yeah, I'm not thinking.
Long term,
I mean, he doesn't need
financial instruments.
That's...
I mean, Bilbo is going to be eating large debt ticks for a while. He's pretty much stuck where he is. He needs
and the game is going along, so yeah, you will get me back.
Bilbo definitely needs to be selling a little bit of this glass so he can keep his kiln running. Yeah. Auto supplying is important. Needed to pick up some iron, needed to be able to supply his buildings. Should not have built a single glass kiln.
Plus is targeting Maddie's wind turbines, which makes sense. Power is still really high. The other 2 players are already on D+1 and D+2 because of the depth tick. That shouldn't be a problem. I mean, this EMP on Foss doesn't really matter because now he's going to make more power money.
I mean, less power money, potentially, because the farms are going to start eating life support.
Yeah, but I'm still meaning, but I mean, he's not negative.
Right, he has a bigger power surplus, but... Anyway, Baroness, D+2, buying up as much of his stock as he can. It's okay to do that. He's also going for Cold Fusion. Cold Fusion will be useful for the moment.
I don't think Manny wants to buy into Bilbo. I mean,
he's not making enough money to make that work is the problem.
He's just saying to Foss, you have the money, you have power money, please buy this person to win the game.
Yeah.
Kind of. He also stole Piranha's Geo, Foss did. Now he's making even more power money.
Also something we had not commented on early, Maddie putting all these farms out here.
Ooh. No, you want to have them next to your base.
Right. As Nomad especially, you can afford to rearrange your claims to get those resources later if you absolutely need them, but you do always want the claims next to your base so that you don't have to spend all that fuel shipping to them, so that it's easier to move in and out of those buildings, so that you don't have to ship those things.
Yeah. Well, yeah. This is like a difficult situation. I mean, there are two players that can still win both, I guess. But Foss is leading by a really good amount because he got those extra claims from auctions. He already has a lot of talents. He has Fleshy Dome up. He has a hacker ray, and he's making power money. So he's going. Probably going to win this one.
Glass surplus is interesting. I guess it makes
Glass.
enough sense. He wants to upgrade, and everyone else's was in glass.
Let's the elite. Put it.
I mean, Varanus also has the 2 glass.
Varanus. Yeah, Varanus has off-base glass, which I don't mind because it's not life support, so it doesn't go to your depths, and there are no Parasol magnetic storms, so it's fine.
I mean, I still didn't like them when they came out on HQ2 because having to buy up all that oxygen to supply them is just painful.
I mean, it's not optimal, and life support was already high. You probably want to go into life support.
Right. Vash does have... Okay, just use those 2 claims. I was about to say, still have the 2 claims.
Was upgraded to HQ level 5. He has 6 claims now. He's transitioning to farms. He probably needs more farms. And go into
Right.
chemicals.
Teleportation.
Stop buying everyone.
Teleportation definitely going to be very nice for him. Gets him out of the problem we mentioned with the Found just being too cramped. Now he can just put his buildings wherever he wants.
Bilbo is in D+3 depth. His elites. He has like 2 single tiles, glass and the farm next to together, and he still doesn't have iron. Even though he has like 2 claims that he can still use on something like iron.
Right. I mean, you don't always need to keep your buildings covered in terms of input costs, but it's generally a pretty good idea. If you're ever not sure, just err on the side of covering your input costs, because otherwise you get stuck in a situation where you just can't afford to run your buildings, and you're just kind of stuck, like Bilbo. Bill. I guess he prefers Bill. 10k for a hacker array.
10k. I mean, what do you want from... I mean, only Medi could really bid on that.
Yeah, that is fair.
The other 2 plays. I
mean, I think I'd still bid it a bit higher as Varanus, but it is reasonable to be worried about adding more debt at this point. Also,
what Varanus can do is go into an optimization center, buy into himself, and then pay off his debt, and maybe hope 5 and the post goes into someone else. That's...
Varanus also desperately needs to be in chems.
Yeah. He has 3 claims, and that's why I wanted to have him carbon scrubbing, because he can use it now, really. The 3 claims, he could have planted those next to his base if he has carbon scrubbing and just make lots of money.
Right. I'm not sure.
He's going for slant drilling, which doesn't really make any sense, because he has all the water, all the silicon, all the steel he needs. You don't need this pattern, so...
Right, there's literally no benefit to it with his current territory.
Okay, Maddie, what is Maddie doing? Still has off-base farms. He has 3 electric, getting a decent amount of money, but they're better markets, so I don't really go for that.
It is worth noting that Varanus has now made something like 34k off of his financial instruments. Just paying off very nicely this game because of Bill. And Vash also doing the right thing, going after Varanus, definitely the biggest threat this game, has a ton of money, can't definitely afford to start pushing, it's just a good move. Going for that optimization center also, it's a nice way to help keep that lead, except he does still have the 2 claims, that is my big concern.
I would... No, everyone wants to go for Bilbo, because that's just free stock and free claims if you buy them.
Yeah, that's also fair.
Which both players, both Medi and Farron, are seeing that. But I still think it doesn't really matter because Foss is leading to so much, it's like whatever.
I think what might have been a reasonable play would be to just push into both players at the same time. If he had enough money, that it would have been fine.
Yeah.
Ah, Baroness was going for slant to go off this carbon tile out here.
Carbon. Oh, but you can go for carbon
It's
scrubbing.
strictly worse than carbon scrubbing.
Carbon scrubbing. It exists.
Meanwhile, Vash...
Boss is going for has another auction.
Yeah.
He has 2 claims now. Still didn't use.
He's done a lot of good things this game, but one consistent issue is just sitting on these claims. I'm not sure what for at this point. Maybe
What?
just... Yeah, at the end of H...
I mean, why not?
I mean, because he
only
could be making extra money with those claims. He was doing the same thing on HQ4. He was just sitting on those last 2 claims right up until he upgraded to HQ5. It's really not great.
I would say he needs some more. He has 2 claims. He probably needs to get 2 more optimization centers because a lot of prices are above 200 and a few above 300. That is like designed to go into more optimization centers.
Although
Is he hacking chemicals?
he was hacking carbon and chemicals at some points.
Also, look at this fleshy dome. Like almost everyone that is doing well in our games has like the better fleshy dome.
Yeah, pleasure domes have been very good today because of the way people have found it. And did mention earlier that Vash was going for that. I think I mentioned it earlier. But either way, it's very good building with that VR to go along with it.
Do you see this sneaky off-road? That is a panel map. I would rather see it as an optimization center because you should think almost every pattern is taken by now.
Yeah, I'm
Why
pretty
would you
sure
still have
that's
that?
just the auto hologram. But right, that was the I think that's the auctioned hacker array tile and not the one he built. Either way.
And it's a big mistake that no one put a spy on that because you always want to see what someone is hacking.
Right, although it's really hard to have the presence of mind to properly counter hacks. So I don't blame these players.
Just to see what he's hacking, just like seeing what he's going to do, it's like useful.
Vash doing a very black magic thing of hiding the off-world in the place that eliminates as much adjacency as possible.
Well, yeah.
I mean, when there's spies available, I don't think it's worth the sacrifice. Sometimes it's useful to hide buildings like that because people don't generally expect it, but it's not worth enough. In any case, Baroness decided to push him to Vash and paid off a ton of debt instead of finishing off Bill. And finishing off Bill, I think, would have been the best route back into the game. Even though I guess Baroness does have financial instruments, keeping Bill alive is in his interest to some extent.
Yeah, but you don't want anyone else to buy him.
Right. And he needed that stock price boost to survive against Vash a little longer. Not that it would have mattered that much because Vash does have the 2 off-worlds up.
He's probably going to buy him now with a foreigners.
Yep, once this off-world launches, there we go.
And boom. Yeah.
And now please buy out Bill because this is way too cheap.
Buy a Bill and sell off yourself and finish the game for that. Okay, he has 2 extra claims, he's getting silicon, which makes... I don't understand these mutinies. Like the second time it's mutinying a reactor.
Yeah,
it's,
it's something that newer players do like to do. They see a profitable building, they just mutiny it. It's when you're doing production buildings, that's just almost never worth it. One, because you're losing all that extra adjacency that is part of the big profit numbers. 2, because you have to ship all that stuff out to actually supply that building and wait for that to come back in. Not getting very much done with that.
Was going to buy Bilbo or Bill.
Oh, Maddie.
I mean, yeah.
It's not nearly enough, but it is a very nice boost.
So what Foss can do is just buy into him and sell it off himself. wins the game really easily.
Yes, that would speed
And
things up, but
because there's still time tiebreakers. Probably doesn't know that, but
yeah. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable just to say never sell your stock because the cases where it really helps you are pretty marginal. And the cases where it hurts you are kind of more common.
I'm also guilty by that. I don't want to sell my stocks because I had a few games
You've
in the
had a few
past
close calls.
I sold out of my stock and almost lost. Okay. Yeah. Farana's had a nice scientific spot, but
just didn't get into power quickly enough.
And more life support. He had 2 reactors, 2 foods early on, and that's not. If you want 3 of 3 early on, life support is really expensive. You don't need the glass. I mean, it's helpful, but it's better to have triangles of 2 set productions of resources.
Right.
Go into power more early, not go into geop. It's better to go into 2 wind turbines, 2 solar panels, because reasons.
Geos are just really expensive as scientists. Although, the one big argument for the Geos is that you do have that free goon squad. It's very easy to completely defend that one Geo. But,
yeah, but you could say the same about the solar panel, like, who's going to attack that?
I mean, they might mutiny you. People like doing that. But yeah, in general, that even just that one geotherm isn't great for a scientist because it barely covers your costs most of the time. You already have that triangle of steel consuming that 0.9 and then everything else. You'll barely be in the surplus. Without boosts or something to help that power along, it's not going to do enough. And when you're founding with 30k of debt, that's important. Getting some debt paid off with power.
Yeah, and also get carbon scrubbing, not slant drilling.
This carbon scrubbing just very, very powerful.
You can have chemicals next to your base. It's useful. Maddie was struggling with silicon early on. He had single buildings. He wasn't using his claims really fast.
Right.
But he didn't struggle with depth, so that's a plus point on his side.
Yeah, the remote water and food slowed him down a bunch. And early on is just really just the $200 electronics.
I'm just seeing this now, but he has like 2 set of pairs of wind turbines. It's like overkill.
I mean, at the time when power was stubbornly staying so high throughout the game, it made some amount of sense, but I think if you were paying attention closely to what everyone else was doing, that's because there was no power early, and eventually when it did come online, this stopped being useful. Although, I mean, Matty also is a nomad. He has those claim returns.
Yeah,
could have easily fixed this problem, and should have.
He didn't do that. Also, I want to say he should have gone into more life support because there was the money. He went into electronics, but that was like only making $50 per second.
Yeah, I think in general, when you have choices between roughly even markets, always err towards the life support. It's more likely to stay strong, and it's just so much money.
Bill was really struggling early on because he didn't iron. He needs to have like, I mean, the high silicon, the 2 still makes sense, but you need an iron for your steel, and then you can like expand through that. Besides that, yeah, I only see 5 now to I'm not sure what he did early on. Did he do it again? He had single buildings, right? Like 1 of each.
Bilbo?
I think he did. Yeah, Bilbo.
He had a pair of steel and the silicon on HQ1. He added a single glass kiln on HQ2, and I think the water?
Yeah. And the water. So.
Yeah,
you need to have more buildings next to each other, like food reactors, because those are making you money.
Right, especially with the starting prices of this game, he definitely needed some iron to get his steel producing. And then just the glass, again, also just a bit of an awkward building to have early, unless the prices are really, really favorable, just because the oxygen, having to supply it constantly. And as an elite or a nomad, that's cannibalizing your silicon income, which you need for the upgrade also. It's just not necessarily ideal. If there's another market you can work with, generally that is probably better.
Yep, and Foss was the player that was really commanding in this one. That was basically because of power.
Yeah, he got into
making
that.
lots of money.
Right, he got into his first geotherm on HQ2. Generally a bit earlier than people recommend, but when you have a double power price and a power colony, that is usually a place where there's a big opportunity. He went for it, no one else did. That paid off very well.
He got a lot of auctions because of that, because with 2 players in a lot of debt, they cannot really bet on those auctions. And he decided to not overbet on those auctions, so it only gave him more late game stuff, which is like big.
Yeah, I mean, in general, he did a pretty nice job of making late game investments with the patent lab. Teleportation, very important. Thinking machines was helpful.
Fleshy domes, 2 of them.
Yeah,
the only complaint what I have is that he needs to have more organizations, because he only had one for a long time and prices were above 200. When prices are above 200, you want to have at least 2, because you're expensive and you got all those auctions, so more claims, that means more stuff to do. I would rather see like 3 optimization centers and just keep upgrading everything.
Yeah, and one last thing, there are also just a bit of awkward building choices. With, I mean, holding onto the claims is a problem, and also just like this off-world placement. Both off-world placements really were a bit questionable. I mean, this is definitely a nice place in a lot of ways with all the extra bonus, but you also have thinking machines, and there are dynamites and goon poppers available in the network virus. So it is very risky to have it out there.
Yes, nanotech, so what he could have done was like put 2 optimization centers next to the next to that one off-world next to his base.
Definitely.
It's better than to have like one single building that is producing something, like not really making lots of money.
Right, and with thinking machines, you're not even that worried about an EMP dropping on there.
But yeah, it was a really straightforward game. Power money basically won the game.
And power money will do that.
Yep. Okay, I have a lobby up.
Alright.